Welcome to Forestry Now, where we explore the forces impacting profitable and sustainable management of commercial forests and natural woodlands. I'm Dermot McNally. In this podcast, I speak to Brendan Guinan of Fíorbhia Farm about his experience raising cattle, pigs and chickens in a mixed species forest near Portlaoise. We discuss the forest itself and his management approach, thinning the forest, creating paddocks and his system of rotational grazing. He also shares his experience with windblow, his observations around nature, rainfall and much more. As always, my email, forestrynowpodcast@gmail.com, and full links to Brendan's business in the show notes. Enjoy the conversation.
Brendan Guinan is my name. I'm the owner of Fíorbhia Farm, the only 100% biological agroforest farm that I know of in Ireland. What that basically means is we farm 100% of our enterprise through trees. There's lots of people with small amounts of forestry and that might run animals through it once or twice. Our farm is embedded in a mixed, diverse forest where we want the trees to actually enhance the living conditions of the animals. And we want the animals to enhance the living conditions for the plants as well. So it's a pretty unique enterprise. And then what makes it even more unique is we do all that without any chemical intervention.
I understand that you bought the forest back in 2019, so tell us how that came about.
The short version of it is I had my own business for 16 years, Hazardous Waste haulage. When I hit 40, I kind of got burnt out, to be honest. I sold the business in 2016. By 2018, I had kind of wound out of it, where I was fully finished in it. And then in 2019, I literally found the forest and it all worked out.
When you went looking for land, were you looking for land or were you looking for a forest?
Good question. I was looking for land, number one, but I was going to plant it anyway. When you plant a tree, you don't get a benefit from it for maybe 20 years or 15 years. It takes time to grow. So when I found this forest, it was ideal for what I was looking for. It was mixed deciduous. There's a little bit of Lodgepole Pine as well. There was no road frontage. It had been forgotten about, as in the previous owner had... it was left in a will, basically, and it was no real connection to the land. So it was planted and the gate was closed and nobody touched it for 20 plus years. So it was really overgrown. It was never thinned out. When it came up for sale, it was sold when the premiums ran out. They didn't see any other value in it. So when I went in to have a look at the land, there was trees down everywhere. The trees were not that healthy either because they were like carrots. They were never thinned out. It should have been thinned out twice by the time, it was about 25 years old when I came in there. And it should have been thinned out really 15 and probably 20 or 22 years, And there was a tree every 3 feet. So you couldn't even get a quad between them. On the other hand, because there was, it was kind of, the trees were struggling because they were all aiming for light and trying to get light. So they were like pencils. The forest floor then was just covered in briars and thistles and nettles and gorse, and they were about 8 feet tall. But if you actually looked beyond all that, looked at the soil was bubbling with life. The worm castings were just coming up everywhere through the soil. You could reach into the soil and dig down a foot deep with your fingers. You didn't need a spade or a shovel. That's where I saw the value, was actually in the soil. I also saw value in the trees. When you thin them out, you have the power to create these little microclimates and shelter belts. That if you just planted the trees now, you'd have to wait a generation for deciduous trees to do that for you.
Clarify for me then, when you were looking for land / forestry, was it to get into farming, or were you kind of half thinking of agroforestry planting, or, where did the animals come into this? Were they an afterthought then, or were they kind of part of the plan?
They were always part of the plan. I have 3 acres at home. And on that 3 acres, I have been, the previous 18 or 19 years, I was growing 2 pigs, 2 cattle, 12 hens, 6 turkeys. I had a grow tunnel as well then where I used the compost from the animals to fertilize the vegetables. And we used to grow about 80% of our food every year. Okay. I did that from the time my youngest child was born. Sorry, oldest child, sorry. She's 22 now. So I've been doing it pretty much my whole life.
You bought the forest. Can you just mention what broadleaf species were growing on the site when you bought it then? What had been planted?
Okay, well, what been planted and what was grown were 2 totally separate things. And the sycamore was planted because the ash dieback, I was reading the actual planting plan from the original plan, and there was mentions that ash dieback might be a problem in the future. So that's why they picked sycamore as in the drier, free draining soil. Then, like, we back onto Coolnamona bog. So the heavier, kind of more acidic and waterlogged soil had red alder planted on it, which actually done very, very well. And then wrapping around the whole site was Lodgepole Pine. Now, we also had a stand of red oak in the middle of it, just one strip in the middle of it, and it's doing very well as well. So that's what was officially planted. But what's actually there now, loads of ash grew, loads of naturally seeded oak grew everywhere. I have one particular oak in the middle of the sycamore plantation, and it's like a beanstalk. It's actually twisted the whole way up, and it's about 70 or 80 feet tall. It's a spectacular looking oak tree, but loads of willow, hazel, there's beech, there's holly, there's rowan, there's a mixed array of different just naturally seeded trees and plants there. It's really cool.
Yeah, okay. And when you went in first to see it with a view to buy-in, it was pretty overgrown. You mentioned a bit of windblow. Can you explain what was happening there, or was the ground very waterlogged, or how did that end up being the case?
There's parts of the land that is very thin topsoil.
Yeah, okay.
So between the unhealthy trees, the ones that didn't reach through to get the light, and the shallow topsoil is kind of an underlying layer of kind of impermeable blue clay or marl underneath the topsoil. Any of the trees that didn't get enough light didn't develop properly, and some of them snapped in the middle, and more of them just keeled over with the rootstock still attached. It was a chaotic looking site when I entered it the first time, you know. Okay,
so that's how you got the forest into your ownership and the state it was in. So what did you do next? You probably thought about doing a bit of thinning, or what way did you go about it?
Well, the first thing I had to do was actually clear the roadway into it. Like there was no road frontage, so there was just an old laneway that at one stage was used going down into the bog back about 100 years ago. But Coolnamona bog was taken over by Portlaoise back in the 50s, and they actually stopped everybody from using the lane. You know, they bought everybody off the bog, any turbary rights that were there, so they could mill it all. So it was a laneway that hadn't been used in years. So I put about 40 grand into the lane to build it up, widen it, even clear off the trees that had fallen on the lane. And then I had to apply for a felon license, of course. So I looked for a continuous cover felon license. I did my own ecology report on it. I hired a guy to do environmental reports and all that. So I actually got the continuous cover felon license within about 6 months.
Okay, very good.
Which was highly unusual, because that was around the time when guys were waiting 2, 3, 4 years for felon license. Then I got in with a chainsaw. I got a map of the site and I drew out kind of a plan. And then I literally just counted the rows of trees in each paddock, and just cut kind of roadways through, which was easy enough with the chainsaw because the maximum diameter of any of the trees was 12 inches, you know, even though it was 25 years old, sycamore. And so that kind of opened up the site a little bit. I used a lot of the timber, the long, narrow timber as post and rail fences for actually fencing the site. I made gates and I've done lots of different things with the timber. And then whatever was left, some of it went into firewood, more of it went into, I actually buried it into the forestry drains that would have been dug through the site.
Okay. To level it out.
To try and level it out, exactly, yeah. And then more of it we piled up into big piles. It's kind of like a bee hotel. It was a wildlife hotel, you know. So we did lots of different things like that. And then fenced it with electric fence and post and rail fencing, and introduced pigs, cattle and poultry into it.
Okay, so things are starting to get interesting at this stage.
Yes. So I used no mechanical intervention at all on the overgrowth that was in the forest. We introduced cattle first because the briars and the overgrowth was 7, 8 feet tall. I'd never walked into a site where, do you know the way nettles are really long and gangly? There was nettles standing taller than I was proudly. Like, I'm 6 foot tall. And they were looking down on me because there was so much shelter around. They could grow up to 7, 8 feet tall, which I'd never seen before. I got the cattle in first. They walked down the overgrowth and they grazed a little bit as well, and they ate some of the briars, and wasn't ideal for them nutritionally maybe, but what it was very good for them was all the trees, because they were struggling so much, they were covered in ivy. And the cattle stripped all the ivy off all the trees. Then we'd move the cattle on. We fenced it into 1 acre paddocks as well. We kept them as small as we could. And so I had 10 Frisian bull calves. And the reason I used Frisian bull calves were all the information I was given from Teagasc and from even my own local vet. He said, animals will die. Beef animals will die in there because the rough grasses will have, say, ticks for blood murn and red water. So when the cattle graze that, they'll actually die from ingesting the ticks. And he said if that doesn't happen, the deer and badgers and wildlife that live in the forest will give the cattle TB. And if that doesn't happen, there is noxious weeds and stuff in there as well that could actually poison animals. And he said, so one way or another, the cattle are going to die. So you're mad to even trying it. So I bought 10 Frisian bulls. At the time, they were only a tenner each. And the reason it was really just to prove the point. The point, I couldn't afford to go buying big Charolais. Anyway, they would have been the worst animals I could have put in there because they're too heavy. So the Frisian bulls were ideal. They were light animals. They weren't expensive to buy, and they actually turned out to be really hardy, and they grew like mad. And so that was one. Then moved the pigs in next. And the reason I did that was a pig can't lift its head above its shoulders. It can go down as much as it wants, but it can't lift its head above its shoulders. So any overgrowth over the shoulder of the pig was inaccessible to it. So the cattle walked all that down within to the forest floor, which meant that the pig could actually really impact the briars and the overgrowth that was the cattle had walked in with their split hoof. And so the pigs they loved it in there because the soil was so easily dug and so free draining. And they had loads of shelter from the trees. So during the summer, the direct sunlight, like pigs can get sunburnt. And then in winter, they hate heavy rain and stuff. So there was a lovely, comfortable environment for them. I made sure the pigs turned over the soil enough that they almost like they ploughed it. And then I moved them out. And at different times, like during the summer, if you left that 1 acre paddock idle for 2 weeks, it would have, the pigs rooting and the cattle would have woken the latent seed bank in the soil. So there was all this new growth starting to come up. And then I moved the hens in there. And the hens would spread whatever waste was left from the pigs and the cattle. They were like little tillers, just leveling out the soil as well. And they picked lots of grubs and lots of different plants that were starting to grow but they left their waste behind too. And what grew after that was unbelievable. Without the animals, and when there was no animals in the forest, the whole balance of the ecosystem was destroyed, you know.
So did you supplement the feed for the animals as well? Or obviously there probably wasn't enough there to keep them going, or how did you do that?
With the cattle, in year one, yes. Because even the grasses that were there, like they were hard grasses, like rushes almost. And that, I learned that the result of that was the fungal-to-bacteria ratio in the soil. Like a forest always has a higher level of fungal matter in the soil. Say a dairy paddock or farmers, fields just for growing grass has a very high bacteria rate in the ratio in the soil. So I needed to reduce that fungal-to-bacteria ratio so that more healthy grass could grow, basically, and more nutritious grass for the animals. Like I measured the fungal-to-bacteria ratio in the beginning; it was 60-1. So there was 60 times more fungal matter in the soil than bacteria. The trees loved it, but the grasses didn't. So we have it back now just from animal intervention and controlled thinning. We have it down to about a fungal-to-bacteria ratio of 5-1.
And Brendan, is that a test that anyone can do, or how do you go about determining that ratio?
Oh yeah, anyone can do it. Yeah, it's a very easy test to do. Now, it's not done in the normal NPK sulfur kind of soil test. You have to ask for it, but it can be done no problem. But it is one of the reasons why, if you plant a tree, say in a standard tillage field or dairy paddock, it will struggle for a long time because the bacteria rate is too high in the soil. So, but you can mitigate that by covering, say, mulching underneath the tree with wood chip, which will help build up a fungal bacteria ratio much quicker for the tree. And so there's lots of things you can do to help it, help that tree to grow. But if you just literally dig a hole and plant a tree in a dairy paddock or a tillage field, it could struggle for 10 years before it really starts to grow.
Yeah, there's some common wisdom there, isn't there? That the trees like to be with trees,
yes,
really.
So
the question that anyone who's farming or anyone who has a forest with trees in it, they'd be wondering about the risk of damaging the roots of the trees through the stamping and the hoofing and the digging.
Yep.
So have you noticed any rooting damage or any damage to some of your trees then?
Yeah, that was actually another problem from experts that kind of advised me before I moved into this operation at all. They said that the animals would kill the trees and damage the roots and damage the bark, and it would be just the whole system would collapse. And what actually happened was the opposite. Now, the pigs actually rooted up and mounded up soil around the trees. The reason for that is we had small paddocks, and if we just let the pigs or cattle run riot over the whole forestry, they would over impact some areas and they wouldn't touch other areas at all. So they would damage trees. And again, in the small 1 or 2 acre paddocks that we had, before they had a chance to do damage, because the wood, a pig is incredibly regenerative, but it can be incredibly destructive, depending on the time of year, the size of the pig, and ground conditions. So my job as, say, a regenerative agroforest farmer is to be able to identify when that animal is regenerative and identify the labour unit that animal can create in a certain area until it gets the benefit of that labour unit and move it before it becomes destructive.
Okay. Yeah, so your eyes are there. You're watching out for the signs, and you rotate it onwards.
Absolutely.
So it's almost like dividing the grassland up into paddocks and keeping the animals moving through the year and giving stuff time to grow behind the animals when they leave.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, Brendan, there was no large clear grassland area, or you don't have any additional grassland area mirroring you that you use at times. So everything is in the forest all year round.
We've just over 30 acres of land. Now, I do have about 4 acres of raised bog at the very back of that again. And in the height of summer, I let younger cattle out there just to graze off kind of the overgrowth from the winter, and it actually lets light down into the heather. And in autumn, there's lovely wildflowers that grow again. So, but that's, Jesus, you might get 2 or 3 days, maybe a week's grazing there if the weather's dry enough. And the cattle love it, but they don't like it for long. You know.
I get you. Let's take a pause from this episode with Brendan to remind you that if you're in the market for forestry, go to forestsales.ie, where you'll see a range of forests, big and small, all across Ireland for sale right now. Details on age, premium, species, access are all available to help you in your search. Now, back to the conversation with Brendan. So at the end of this, and I know you have a meat box scheme and you deliver food to different customers, but in terms of the timber output, do you see yourself harvesting more timber, or is the timber being thinned on an ongoing basis as the trees get bigger? What's happening with the trees over the last couple of years since you did the first thinning?
In different parts of the forest, I've tried out different trials, basically. Self-imposed trials, right?
Yeah.
So I thinned really, lovely areas and replanted with apple, pear and plum trees. And just to try and use the sycamore trees as a nurse crop for the younger trees. I've planted walnut, hazelnut in other areas. And I've tried not to thin too much as well, because it's very easy to chop down a tree. It's not easy for it to grow back again. So I've erred probably a little bit too much on leaving too many trees in places as well. And you can see where you've treated 2 paddocks the exact same, except for one paddock has more trees left standing, and there's way less grass in it because the sun can't get through for photosynthesis with the canopy at different times of the year. And then we have cleared much bigger areas. Like there was about 1.5 acres of an area that had trees struggling unbelievably badly. There were sycamore. There were only about 8 foot tall. They were the same age and planted at the same time as trees that are 60 foot tall.
Right, yeah.
I couldn't figure out what was wrong. So I hired a track machine, an excavator, and dug a couple of test holes to see what kind of soil and how deep was the soil. And I also asked some of the neighbours about what was the history of the place. And one of the neighbours told me that actually was a pond at one stage. Back when the N7 motorway was being built, like I'm 1 mile outside of Portlaoise, and the motorway passes through Portlaoise, or it passes within a mile or 2 of me. When they were digging out the motorway, the council came and offered anybody who wanted soil to kind of level up and from the spoil of the motorway. And the previous owner agreed that she would get topsoil, but she actually got pure lack. Nothing would grow in it. So the trees, they didn't die, but they just couldn't get enough nutrients to actually grow, and the roots couldn't go deep enough. So it used to flood in winter as well, because again, there was still a basin, and there was nowhere for the water to go. I dug a couple of ponds in it. I ended up joining that up into one big lake. I dug out most of what the council put in and filled it with fish. And now having a good acre plus of a lake in that area now, that where herrings come in and rob the fish, and we've ducks nesting on an island that I left in the middle of it. And I used some of that impermeable blue clay to build a cob house as well.
Is the underlying soil, is it peaty based, or is it mineral based, or is there a mixture on the site?
there's mixture. Like when you drive down our laneway into the farm, straight away you're dropping, falling away from the road where you're driving down a hill, you drop, and end up in the bog. So about 2/3 of our land is kind of free draining, fairly decent mineral soil, and that's where the sycamore is planted. And then the final third, then it just actually changes unbelievably quick from being fairly free draining to just black and kind of, it's not peaty, but a much higher organic content in it. It gets black and it waterlogs majorly in winter. So the red alder loves that though.
Right, yeah, and it's thriving. And you mentioned lodgepole. Do you make much use of the lodgepole in your paddocks, or are they kind of ancillary at the edges?
Again, there's lots of trees actually down in the middle of the lodgepole, but they're much bigger trees because they obviously grew much quicker. I've used the Lodgepole Pine as a wintering kind of shelter for the animals because there's 30 plus years of pine needles underneath. You'd actually lie down and sleep in them yourself. It's that,
right.
It's not comfortable.
Yeah.
And I'd roll out bales of hay in there for the cattle, and the cattle thrive. I've never had a sick animal in the pine forest because there's fresh air getting through. There's still a really healthy canopy of shelter, and the pine needles were there. You couldn't muck it up, So as regards value of the timber, I've got a couple of guys to look at it, and they said it's mulch. Like you just cleared, mulch it, and replant it. So I did. I got in with a chainsaw, and I cleared about an acre. Thinned about an acre. And as soon as I opened it up, the rest of them fell.
Yeah. Okay.
It is something I'm just going to have to bite the bullet with and get a machine in, clear them, and mulch them and start from scratch again, replant.
And have you any idea what you would plant, Brendan, now that you've seen what's working and what's not working?
There's lots of silver birch actually growing through it.
Okay.
As it is. So and also that the acre that I thinned a couple of years ago, I planted some Rowan berries and some blueberries in there, and they're doing well.
Okay.
So I'd love to get maybe a couple of acres of blueberries going with maybe shelter belts of beech or hazel, or I'd rather deciduous trees if possible.
Yeah. And in all of this, it's a very unconventional but very practical, and it sounds like a great way of managing the animals and working with the forest. But how have you found the department to work with on this? Because quite often, if things are written in a rule book, they find it hard to deviate from that. Have they been flexible with you? Have they turned a blind eye? Or do you feel you've got support?
Do I feel I've got support? No is the answer on that. I haven't needed them. I do need a TB test my cattle each year. That's the only time a vet is on my farm now. Not because I don't believe in vets, but I don't need them. Like the animals don't get sick. The only grants I've got is the continuous cover felling license, and I'm grant for that. I got no grants for animals. My land is not eligible for organics. I tried to join the organic scheme, and I couldn't get any funding for that because it is officially still forestry. It was planted as commercial forestry. And so I've got no agricultural grants. I've got no environmental grants. So I don't really have inspectors coming out checking what I'm doing.
Yeah.
For that reason. So the only way I make money is through sales, direct sales and marketing of our produce.
Yeah. No, which is fine. And it just a curious one, because many people are moving towards agroforestry, but there's other people like yourselves who maybe have a bit of forest that was planted beside them or planted at the back of the farm. And some of them are like you, they're starting to integrate that into their farming activity. So you seem to be further down, and you've brought a lot more diversity into how you're farming the forest effectively than anyone else nearly that's out there. Just in terms, again, of the forest and your plans for the future. So Have you any plans to expand the area under management, or would you take on more forests to do the same? Or are you just happy with what you're managing at the minute?
This year, say 2026, I have several plans, short-term, medium and long-term. And the long-term plan is going to be intergenerational. And that's really the big picture. I want to design a system that actually attracts, if not my family, then somebody else that will be interested in taking it over, which is one of the major problems with agriculture at the moment. They don't have a succession plan. Most young people are walking away from agriculture because they don't see a future. The plan for 2026 is actually to turn my farm into a demonstration farm. I was doing it this year as well to a certain extent. Like, we hold open days. We invite farmers in who are interested in seeing how they can incorporate some forestry back into productive land use again, but without damaging the trees, So a demonstration farm short term for training other farmers. And also it's really just to shout from the rooftops what's possible. It's amazing. It's way beyond what I thought was possible. Standing back and just letting things happen. We over impact ourselves with too many sprays and too many big machines coming in, thinking you're doing good and you're actually doing so much damage. That's the short term. The medium plan, I want the farm to become a destination for the general public. So building the Cob House was a kind of a test to see, is it possible maybe to build accommodation on the farm with the resources of the farm, which would be one of the core principles of regenerative farming. Use the resources you have on your farm first to its greatest potential before you start looking to import. But if it's building materials or if it's nitrates to get or whatever, you use the resources you have. So we built that one Cob House. It's a test case. It's working really well at the moment. We dug the lake. It's full of fish. We've anglers that come in and fish as well, and we teamed up with local archery club, and we've had the national archery championships on the farm for a couple of years.
Wow. Okay.
So we're building next year. We're going to build a community garden nestled in a paddock in the woods, where we're going to have some allotments. We're going to have some grow tunnels. We're going to set up grow your own, bring in general public and run grow your own classes and stuff like that as well. So that'll be the medium term, to actually see how many incomes we can actually generate off that one piece of land.
Yeah.
That will help the long-term plan of succession then.
Yeah, once it's viable.
Yes.
Have you considered advertising on Ireland's only dedicated forestry podcast? Get in touch with me at forestrynowpodcast@gmail.com to see how I can make it work for you. Now, back to the interview. I wonder, have you thrown your eye over the new agroforestry scheme, or have you gone to any demos, or have you any opinions on it or how it might work?
I have. The payments are very good. Okay. I have one problem though, right? And that is, if you're convincing people on payments only, it's a very shaky foundation for any scheme. And I know lots of guys who are interested in agroforestry, but they're petrified to tie up their land with trees in case they lose control of, say, thinning, it's the felon license and that it's going to devalue their land. And all the hear and see is negative stuff. Where the payments are good, they're very, very good, but there's a whole section missing of how trees can actually really enhance your land and by making your animals more comfortable. By actually, you can actually grow way more grass because your grass and your soil needs that shelter too. I say today, I don't know, horrendous rain, right? An average rain drop falls at 25 kilometers an hour. And if that raindrop hits the ground, bare soil, it can be really, really destructive. It can wash the soil away. It can compact the soil. And if it hits grass to a certain extent, the grass can hold it. But again, the short root stock of the grass means that it can't infiltrate too deep. If you have deep roots from trees there as well, number one, the canopy of the tree can actually catch up to 60% of that rain and slow it down, that when it hits the ground, it has a chance to infiltrate way more, recharge the aquifers, and actually build resilience on your farm. There's a huge information gap there that nobody is really addressing, and that would encourage a lot more farmers if they could truly understand the benefits of trees and even the benefit of the right tree planted in the right place. There's so many trees out there that are being imported that are not healthy, and they're being planted in the wrong places, being planted with the wrong methods, and the trees are struggling for so long. And I don't want to sound negative, but it's the payment alone will not build a long-term agroforestry system. It's very, very good, but there's a huge area there that needs to be fulfilled as well.
Yeah. No, I hear you on that. I suppose seeing is believing, and when people see other people succeeding and doing it, it gives them a template. It makes it easier to take the stab. What have your neighbours thought that are still farming around you? I mean, I'm sure they're pulling their animals off the land in October, November, and here you are sitting in your forest with the animals out all year. Have you had any conversations with them, or because if the classic example in rural agriculture around the world is that when one neighbour is doing something that's working, it's much easier to talk people into it. So what about your own neighbours, Brendan? Are they convinced by what they see?
There's two types of farmers out there. One guy thinks I'm totally mad. The other guy is sick of the system that's there and is looking for something alternative, but just doesn't know where to turn. And they're the guys and ladies that are coming down interested, nearly afraid to say, oh God, this looks good, until they try it out on a small scale themselves. But it's encouraging.
So what would be the one piece of advice for anyone thinking of agroforestry that you'd give to them, Brendan, then?
Trees will enhance your income, number one. It will enhance your land will benefit, your animals will benefit. In turn, you'll benefit long term. You have to think longer than this year, next year, even 5 years. You have to think even planning for the next generation, because trees are a long-term investment. And also the type of trees and the advice you're given, that's number one. There's so many forest plans out there and forest owners that come to me, and they're being forced into kind of keeping trees on their land. Say small plantations that should be thinned now, but they're not accessible. They were planted in the middle of farms with no roads near them, and they're not economically viable to get machinery in. And so they're actually spots now that are being fenced off and throwing pigs in there to try and tidy them up, and even over time then getting a chainsaw themselves, maybe on a Saturday, and chopping trees and stuff. So all these badly thought out forest plans and plantations or that people never even thought would be a problem in years to come, how to harvest them, how to access them. There's a really detailed and forward-thinking plan needed before you even think about planting anything. Now, that's happening a lot more now, with the ecology plans as well. And so that's number one. Then I would always look at what trees grow naturally in that area. I would try and stick to simple native trees that suit that soil. And then it's so much easier. They will be way healthier. It's basically whatever grows like a weed in that area. is the ideal tree to grow. And I would definitely mix a mix of fast grown and slow grown trees as well, like the willow, hazel, that will grow fairly quick. Mixed through maybe some sycamore, some horse chestnut, something like that. And I'd always mix a few old growth trees then as well, a few oaks and stuff through it as well. The more diversity you have in the beginning, the better. Gaining the benefits with the fast growing trees from the roots going deep quickly and getting the nutrient cycling going and breaking up any compaction with the roots. And you're also getting that shelter, above ground shelter for your animals much quicker. And if it's willow, like your cattle will graze it and as natural tannins and a natural antibiotic, and get the maximum value for the health of the animals, the trees, the soil as quickly as possible.
No, Brendan, thanks very much for having the chat. Is there anything else we didn't talk about that you wanted to mention, or any other bits of advice that you have for anyone thinking about it?
I would advise anybody who really wants to do this to go to somebody who's in the middle of it already. Get the big picture, like the forestry planners. They're needed too, but most of them guys don't have forestry themselves. They're just following the rules and ticking boxes. But people really need to see forests on the ground that have done well, that have done badly, why they've done badly. Need to do serious and detailed soil tests, like way deeper than just the NPK, sulfur, tests, and really believe in what you're doing. There's an infinite benefit to the right trees being planted in the right place at the right time.
No, look at Brendan, thanks very much for taking the time to chat. That's been very informative, much appreciated.
Thanks for reaching out.
So that's all from my conversation with Brendan. If you'd enjoyed the show, please rate it on your podcast app or share it with a friend. Bye for now.